everyone. Hey, thanks for joining us, tuning in with us again today. I'm Fred Johnson. I'm the founder of InitiativeOne. So I get to introduce to you a very special guest, a friend of mine, Sheriff Matt Joske. He has been a part of the InitiativeOne family. He's been a raving fan. We're a raving fan of him. As you're going to see in just a moment, he has a hunger and a passion, if not obsession, for being the best leader that he can possibly be. He and I have been working for quite a while. We both have a vision that we want to take many of the things that we talk about at InitiativeOne in terms of modern leadership. We want to take it out into the country and introduce to more and more police agencies, law enforcement agencies, the concepts of how emotional intelligence today can enhance and take care of many of the issues that often are arising in communities where there's a lack of trust and narratives between the community and law enforcement that can be changed. And so we're going to talk about that today. Matt, it is so good to have you. Matt is the sheriff of the Kewaunee County Sheriff's Department. It is so good. We're working right now with your team.
Yes.
And it's awesome. What have you found? How are your gentlemen? Because some of them came in with that stereotype. I'm a tough guy, and I shouldn't say. And yet I've seen them right in front of my eyes begin to transform. Talk to us about that.
Right, you're dealing with a culture. You're dealing with a population that many times you have some real tried and true belief systems. Trainings, history. And so to challenge that or to broaden it, just like any other person, that's a change. And that requires some open thinking. That requires maybe some discomfort. And I credit you and appreciate the way that you are pushing us into that, out of that comfort level into growth. So it is neat to see, again, they're amazing staff members, the leadership that I'm surrounded by. I'm honored to be surrounded by that leadership, but we all can grow.
Matt, you are attending and leading some of the avant-garde leadership processes that are now being introduced to law enforcement. Could you talk about how what changes that you're seeing, and how does emotional intelligence, which is self-regulation, which is putting yourself in the other person's shoes, showing respect, being able to anticipate where that person is. What have you seen? Does that have an impact upon the law enforcement community and their effectiveness?
Absolutely. You're talking all about relationships. That's the bread and butter of what we do, is establishing relationship, establishing rapport. In order to do that, you have to have that awareness. So you've got two things that can sometimes conflict against each other: tactical necessity, right, and that emotional intelligence piece. And of course, we have to make sure that our men and women are keeping themselves safe, that they're making decisions which require them sometimes to control everything and everybody, right, and trust very little. So that's a reality of our world that we've lived in for decades. But I think there's a way in which we can broaden that scope and start to introduce emotional intelligence, start to introduce empathy and awareness of not only our own feelings, but what might be the drivers to the feelings and emotions of those that we're dealing with. And by knowing that, how can we then more effectively interact for better outcomes, both for the officer as well as the individual we're dealing with?
So in a way, some of the things that we teach would appear counterintuitive in the law enforcement community, such as I've had people say, other professionals in law enforcement say, you're asking me to approach a situation from a place of respect. There are people that I have respected or approached that way, and we got burned at a stop. And are you telling me that I need to put my guard down? Because putting my guard down can get me killed. And so how do you reconcile that the force mentality that you have to use at times with an approach that looks at the humanity first and tries to establish trust, because we know today that ultimately long-term relationships are dictated by trust in each other. So how do you mold those two together?
Sure. So the two aren't divorced from each other. The two are actually reliant upon each other. So I don't think that we're asking anybody to diminish or decrease the level of tactical awareness, situational awareness, control, but we're asking to grow. So we're asking them to add on top of that this ability, this unique ability to be able to go above and beyond just tactical necessity. It kind of goes to those basic needs of life, right? Go beyond just basic survival and bring it up a notch and say, okay, what am I missing here? What am I missing? How can I broaden my perspective to this person? And again, by treating them with respect, you're not taking away your respect. By providing that vulnerability, you're not creating your own vulnerability. It's not a one or the other. It's actually an increase. It's bringing it all together for a much better reaction, outcomes. So no, this isn't about depleting any sort of tactical awareness. It's much like we went through crisis intervention training years ago, trying to deal with and understand those that might be in mental health crisis. So we just have to be careful. We're not seeing everything as belligerent criminal behavior, to have that open prism, that we're looking through, that field of vision to say, wait a second, what am I missing? There may be more going on here. But we have to be able to have that, again, emotional intelligence to get past that basic necessity of survival and be able to look beyond it.
So let's say you're an officer going into a traffic stop. So we teach that whenever you're in any kind of conflictual encounter, whether it's in law enforcement or everyday interactions with people in our lives, we tell people that ultimately people feel safe when they feel respected by the person who's in front of them. And so we're saying to law enforcement, there's an added narrative that we want to have them dancing in their head as they approach that situation. The first is be careful, be leery, be observant. But the other narrative is, I'm going to show respect. I'm going to show respect. Even if this person chooses to be disrespectful to me, that's information about him or her. That's not information about me. And I'm not going to take this. This is not about me and my mama. Have you found that if an officer can internalize what we just said, that can make a difference in his or her effectiveness in their daily work?
Absolutely. And I think it starts with us understanding what is our role. Yes, it's to keep our streets safe, our communities safe, to effect arrests. But in the end, what is our primary thing that we provide, not only to our citizenry, our taxpayers, our communities, but also to those that maybe make the wrong choices? And what it all comes down to is dignity. It's dignity. And we can provide dignity while we effect an arrest. We can provide dignity while we're responding to that domestic or to that assault. And so to have that broadness, that awareness, say, okay, I have to do what I have to do, but I have to have the agility, the mental agility to be able to toggle from tactics back to empathy, tactics to dignity and respect. And those two can all live together, right, and play together in the same sandbox. We don't have to just come at something with pure tactics at the cost of that person's dignity. And as you said, Doctor, it doesn't take away from our power, our authority. In fact, it enhances it and makes it more effective.
Yes, because when someone respects the person, we tend to respect someone who is showing respect to us. And that often de-escalates a situation by itself. So we talk about that. What we're talking about is combining the science and the art. The science says, come in with adequate resources. Make sure that you're tactically excellent in how you're dealing with this. But the art says, but be flexible. Be able to read the situation. Treat this person as a human first, and treat them the way that they want to be treated, and so that's the art of leading people. And so we're saying you have to combine both to do your job effectively, to stay safe yourself, but also to enhance the odds that there won't be an encounter that takes years between a community and a law enforcement agency to heal. And so what would you say? We talk about, Matt, that we all have the typical American adult has a self-belief level of 2.7, which means I'm a fraud, and I hope people don't figure me out. And we've learned that an effective leader has to work on their self-narrative so that as my self-narrative grows, I change the way I think about myself, and I change the way I behave towards others. And we've talked about that you need to be at somewhere around a 7 or an 8, where your narrative is I'm enough and no one can devalue me. And we talked about this in our process together this past week. How would a 2.7 person, or a person who's in a 2.7 state, because we all get into those states, how would an example of a person who is in a 2.7 state in how they approach a situation that turns out to be absolutely something that you wouldn't want to ever train or see? What would a 2.7 encounter look like?
I think you'd see somebody that's coming into it with a lot of preconceived notions, a lot of biases, a lot of internal narratives, whether it be about themselves, the situation, the person that they haven't even met yet. So I think that idea that, okay, this is my 12th stop in the last couple hours. The people are always speeding through this area, or we've gotten complaints of reckless driving, and so they're making that assumption of what they're going to encounter. And I think you have to really hold that at bay, because you don't know. People talk about law enforcement as, you only pull over this type or that part. Can't see that from a quarter mile away. They don't realize that most traffic stops we're making, we initiate those, whether that's from radar or whether that's from a distant watching an intersection that somebody, fails to stop at a stop sign. We have no idea who's behind that wheel, right? None of that. And so we're basing that on what we call, of course, probable cause. But again, we have to make sure that as law enforcement, we're coming into that, with an ability to be flexible. Again, mental agility. The good news is that, the law enforcement as a field, I think, has a greater capacity for conflict resolution. I think that we're better prepared for it, because really everything we embark upon is a conflict. There's never where we walk up to a traffic stop and they're glad to see us. They're like, wow, thank you for pulling me over. So almost every one of the contacts we make are wrought with some sort of tension. And for 99.9% of the time, the men and women are doing an amazing job at deconflicting, right? At reducing and de-escalating what could be a very elevated emotional experience. But that being said, we've got to make sure that we create the language, which I think is what InitiativeOne does, is it creates that in language that's common to understand, okay, I'm being little Matt. I'm being a 2.7. Maybe for whatever reason today, I didn't bring my 8.0. I brought my 2.7. Yeah. So it's that idea of self-regulation, and how can we share that with law enforcement so that as they're patrolling and they're dealing with maybe the remnants of the last call, we're going maybe right from a child abuse, and now you got to go off to a domestic, and how do we clear the mind and reset that, okay, I'm not dragging anything from that call to this call. Let's start fresh. Let's take these people for what and who they are, and not drag all this stuff with me.
So, my brother spent his life in law enforcement. He was a police chief in a community south of Indianapolis. He was the head of the National Canine Association, and I was proud of him, so proud of him. And so I'm into law enforcement. What I'm not into is feeling diminished. And so let me give you an example. Several years ago, my wife was pregnant, and I was away from the house, and she was past due. And I get this phone call from her, and she said, Fred, I think I've just gone into labor. And I'm about 2.5 miles from the house. So I'm in my truck, and I pull out, I check, there's no one there, but I'm accelerating up that. I want to get home. And there was a local police officer who saw me, came after me, and I immediately pulled over. And without checking, without coming to me, he went into that classic posture that some officers use of control, is immediately screaming at me at the top of his voice. And he lost me immediately. I've never been arrested. I pride myself in being a good citizen. I was trying to say, my wife has called and she's going into labor. And you all get lied to so often. So I can understand, okay, we'll see. But he spent 30 minutes checking out everything while she's there. And I am belligerent at this point. I was not in my 8.0 self, Matt. How would that look different? Because there are a lot of layers there. How would an 8.0 officer approach that? And maybe he would have approached it the way that this gentleman did. Educate me on how you can combine that in a situation like that.
Sure. Again, we speak about that ability to toggle, to be able to shift gears. So initially, I mean, the visual information that you provided him with through your driving, right, set a tone. And possibly he or she had life experiences, career experiences, professional experiences that maybe led to something much different than what your situation was going to lead to. So it is hard because you're talking split-second decisions. But the minute that reality, right, that the evidence of the reality presents itself, you've got to have the awareness to be able to change gears and say, that's not what I thought it was.
Yes.
And that's hard because too often law enforcement, we cling a little too long to, again, that this is what I think it is, this is what I think it should be. And we've got to have that ability to toggle and say, okay, I got this one wrong. Whether that's based on a person, an event, an observation, to be able to toggle. And again, I think, slowly we're bringing some of that training in with scenarios that we deal with tactics where we talk about high-risk traffic stops. And even if we have to start at that elevated level, when can we bring that down? When can we do that? Because at the end, the bottom line is, and I've said this to people many times, I'm going home to my family.
Yes.
And people say, well, you could have done this, but maybe I could have. But I have to make sure that I always balance it to the fact that I'm going home to my family. And I think that's the way most men and women in law enforcement, they're going to put some weight to that rather than put themselves at a compromised, tactical, vulnerable state because they realize I'm going home. I got to go home.
My brother would talk about this, and I'll never forget, I was with him in the car one day, riding with him, and he stopped someone and used that elevated tone. He's a big dude anyway, and you could tell that family knew he wasn't messing around. And he found very quickly that they were a family on the way to church. And as soon as he saw all the information, he realized, okay, this is not a criminal situation. And I saw him heard him say to that gentleman, listen, I'm sure that when I was yelling at you, you had a lot of stress and you maybe even be feeling like you were being disrespected and mistreated. Please understand that is something that we're taught to control a situation that we don't know about. And as soon as I saw who you were, you'll notice I backed off because I don't want you to feel disrespected. And I thought that was a master stroke because he had to do what he had to do, but he found a way for that person to leave that encounter feeling that he had not been disrespected. I thought that was masterful. That's that idea of combining tactical with emotional intelligence and figuring out how to create a win-win situation, if it's possible.
Absolutely. Being able to share the knowledge and the information that there's a difference between assertive and aggressive, the difference between skeptical and cynical, being able to understand that sometimes we get caught in these thinking traps. And it's hard to break out of those thinking traps. And that ability, again, that agility to be able to go from tactics to compassion, tactics to empathy. Literally, you can go hands-on, have to escort somebody to the ground to stabilize them, right? To get them into a place where they're not going to harm themselves or someone else, but you can then toggle very quickly to, sir, ma'am, are you okay? Are you okay, right? To be able to go right from tactics to compassion, and that's that emotional intelligence piece.
That's awesome. So let's flip it. You've got an officer who is in an 8.0 place and comes up to that same situation that we described as the person in a 2.7 moment. How would an 8.0 mindset that I'm enough, that I respect myself and I want to show, how would that person demonstrate themselves in that situation?
Sure, and I think it goes back to the difference between portraying aggressiveness and assertiveness. To be able to walk up and be able to own the situation, because that's typically what we're trying to do. Call it, controlling or owning. You want to have control of the situation, but you can do that without damage. You can do that in such a way that you're maintaining compliance, but it's a compliance based in respect. It's a compliance based in appreciation for what you're trying to do. But when you cross the line into being aggressive, right, now you've lost. Now your compliance is purely because of fear. And that's no place to try to establish any sort of balance is between aggressiveness and fear. It should be assertiveness and respect.
Wow.
So that I think is the sweet spot that, we want to live in, is that I don't have to come across weak, as a pushover, as, a vulnerable target. That can do more harm than good. So when you come in too soft, you actually create an increased danger to yourself. So you have to be able to portray a strong front. That's how you minimize a lot of those threats. But there's a threshold that you cross between assertiveness and aggressiveness.
Well, role play. Well, Sheriff, I hear that, but I hear you. What I'm really hearing you to say is I need to get soft, and I need to start being naive.
Yep, not at all. What I'm saying is you need to be confident. You need to have faith in your own skills and your own ability and the training you've received and the person that you are to approach something with the confidence that you can give that respect, and you're not giving it you're giving it freely, not out of some sort of vulnerability.
So, when we begin to share these concepts with the law enforcement community, especially a community that has been hammered, and when you get hammered over and over, you get gun shy. And I've seen when we've started talking about this, it's like, okay, is this another person that's going to be putting me down? Is this another person who's been telling me that all my life I've been a screw up as a law enforcement person? Because you're fooling with that person's identity at that point. What would you say to that person that we're trying to help them become the best version of themselves while they are doing police work, and they're hearing that you need to develop emotional intelligence and even work on your self-awareness? What would you say to that person who feels that you're attacking them?
I think what we start with is again the fact that really in law enforcement, the level of social intelligence, emotional intelligence, right, is actually probably in law enforcement, we possess it. We probably have the strongest ownership of it than a lot of different career fields and disciplines. But we also have, again, that high level of, tactics. And we're very unique. It's much like we say in the veteran community, that if somebody's going to approach it, we're always going to be hesitant until it's somebody from within our own discipline. That's, I think, one of the big barriers as well, is that if we're going to say, here's some ideas, there's always going to be that, where have you been? What have you seen? You got to walk in my shoes, because there are so many amazing lived experiences in law enforcement, and we don't want to diminish the value, the impact of what they've done. But I think there's a way we can say that they already possess it. We're just going to help them cultivate it, nurture it, and bring it out in their daily practices.
There's so many things I love and respect about you, Matt. And one of those things is your love for people is infectious, and it's very clear. And yet we know in law enforcement, dealing with certain types in society, day in and day out, it can begin to jade you. And to the point you can even begin to develop that bias that everybody must, because I deal with liars every day, everyone must be a liar. And how do you, as a police officer, maintain that love for people, knowing that you're dealing with a sector of society that is sometimes really difficult to love. How do you find that balance?
And I think it comes out in some of the lessons that we're walking through, and it's making sure you adhere to and always have a connection to your why. And if your why, in public service, your why has to be an absolute love of human beings, of people. If you're doing it for the pension, time to get out. If you're doing it for the salary, if you're doing it for, I don't know, right? Power, right? I don't know, but we have to make sure, especially in these roles, that we remember our why. Because no matter what is the call that we come from, no matter the people that we deal with, they can never take away my why. Yes. It might frustrate me for a period of time, but they'll never take away my why. And I think that's important in this training as well. And this awareness, this transformational leadership is peeling away the layers and getting to the absolute foundation of why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Because once we have a solid grasp of that, there's nobody that can take it from us.
And there are times that I'm sure every police officer will say, I need to go get a real job where I'm not going to be treated this way every day. And there are those days that you just don't want to get out of bed and go to work. And yet what we have found is that sometimes all you have is that compelling purpose to get you to do what exhaustion or fear or feeling unappreciated will cause you to say, I just want to quit. Sometimes all we have to keep us going is our purpose, and it's all we need at times. And thank you for reminding us that the why behind what and how we're doing will sustain us even in the most difficult times in our work.
Yep. And you provide a definition of purpose in my first go through, and I won't know it verbatim, but basically this idea of doing what you're good at, what brings you joy, and what brings maximum positive impact. Those have to all be there, because if people love doing something, but it brings zero impact to the betterment of our communities, that's not purpose. If people aren't any good at it, right, but they keep doing it because they think that, all those pieces have to work together, that you found that thing that you thrive at, that you're good at. And not only that, but it has meaning. It brings impact. And that can be the frustrating part, is sometimes at the end of the week, at the end of the day, we think, are we making a difference?
Yes.
And that's where leadership, again, we have to be the ones at the 30,000 foot level, keeping everybody's eye on the ball that yes, we are. It may not look like it at 2 a.m, but when we look at it in totality, we look at our communities and what we're providing, right, we're making an impact. And the biggest part of that, again, to what we're providing, whether it's on a traffic stop, whether it's on a call, critical call, whatever it is, our goal is to provide, yes, a sense of safety, a sense of security, right? But we take it to the next level. You have to make sure we're maintaining people's dignity. That's our product.
That whole thing of self-talk, when you're discouraged and you're wondering if you're making an impact, that's positive, constructive self-talk that we give to us sometimes is everything, isn't it? You talked about the definition of purpose. I'll repeat that. Purpose is what brings you your greatest joy while having your highest impact, while using the least amount of energy, because it comes natural to you. So as we wrap this up, you and I have been working at this now for a couple of years, and we both have a passion of introducing InitiativeOne to law enforcement all over the country. What would you say to the police chief? What would you say to a fellow, to a deputy or a fellow sheriff or someone? By the way, the things that we're talking about today is what they are teaching today at Quantico. These are the things that they're teaching at West Point in the military and in Annapolis and Colorado Springs. The things that we're teaching, the hierarchy in the military and law enforcement is teaching this all over the country now. What would you say to that person who's contemplating, I want my police force to be the very best and most effective that it can be? What would you say in terms of InitiativeOne's impact upon your thinking that has been so helpful?
not all trainings are created equal, right? It's very easy, running a budget, being an administrator, saying, I've got X amount of money in my budget. I'm going to check the box. I'm going to say, there, I sent them to 10 hours, 5 hours, whatever it is. Not all training is created equal. And you want to make sure that that quality of that training is of such that it even supersedes their career. We're not just talking about a professional development. We're talking about life-changing.
They can take it home,
right,
and use it in their relationships with their spouse or their kids, or find a level of health or contentment that they have not had in a long time.
It's about building character, right? We bring these folks in, these young men and women, and we do our best to try to get a good read on their level of character, right? So because in law enforcement, in any discipline, right, there's character and there's competence. For far too long, we've been hiring men and women based solely on competence. We've looked at their scores. We've looked at the outcomes from the institutions. We said, there's our person. And we haven't necessarily focused a lot on that character. But as administrators, when the other side of it comes around, as far as disciplinary actions, termination, it's not because of competency. We're losing people because of character. Decisions made because of questionable character. Decisions made because they weren't solid in their character. So that's where this comes in, is we really truly want solid men and women serve our communities. The competency isn't enough. It's good to have it. You have to have it. And that's a quantifiable, matrix that we're provided when they come in. But if we aren't able to continue to shore up and support their character, we're destined to lose them, because sooner or later, if they're in a dark place, they're in a bad place, and they don't have the skills to be able to navigate those things, something's going to manifest professionally that's gonna end to a bad result in the community as well as the department.
So, Sheriff Joski, there are police officers who are going to be watching this. There are departmental leads that are going to be watching this. And they're going to say, I want to know a lot more about this, because this is the missing link that I've been looking for. It may be a person or an entire department. How do they get in touch with you so that I'm sure they'll have questions? How do they get in touch with you?
Well, I mean, just like any sheriff's department, go on the website. We have a Facebook. I'm available for anybody. This is important stuff. This is really where we need to be pointing our focus and our direction in the upcoming years. We have to do better. We have to do better. And not to say we're starting from ground zero. We have some of the most amazing men and women serving our communities. But why would we not want to give them the tools to enhance that toolbox, that skill set, to make them as successful, not only professionally, but to see that they're thriving. They're thriving in their personal relationships, in their professional relationships, in their careers. So, I mean, you're right. I think we have to be passionate about it, because I don't know that it's been emphasized enough in the past decades. But I'm so grateful that we're at a place where we can have these conversations and there is a focus. So we have to look at, our driving forces, budgets. Our budgets and how we set our budgets say a lot about our values as leaders, right? And our visions. And if we continue to spend them on the same things and not developing those men and women, we can't expect different outcomes. So we've got to really look at our own priorities as leaders and what we do in our budgets and our policies and everything that drives us. And is that the goal?
So Kewaunee County, Wisconsin, just go on their website. They'll find you.
Yep. I mean, everybody I think the county has my cell phone. I put it out on the social media. Again, it's about community engagement. It's about being there for each other. That's what it's about. We didn't get into this to make a boatload of money. We didn't get in this to be popular. We got in this to serve our communities, and we can never forget that why.
I think it's pretty clear. I love your passion. I love your passion for who you are and your passion for serving people, and you do it so well, and we are privileged to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you. You all, it's been a great day. Compelling. This is Matt Joski is the epitome of law enforcement at its best. And we thank you for your life of service and the impact that you're making. Thank you for joining us. And check us out on our website. We have a new book out called Leadership, A to Z Leadership, What Great Leaders Do. Check that out on our website and join us on our think tanks. It's our gift to the community. It's our gift to you once a month for 45 minutes. It's always scheduled on a Friday. Check us out on our calendar on our website. Again, Matt, great to see you. Great to have all of you all. Have a great day. Thank you. Take care.